recode variables. This is something that you will be doing for the rest of the course, and so I want you to have some examples of how to do this, and I want you to start getting comfortable with this process. So sometimes you will have a variable that has a lot of different values, and for some analyses you'll find that having all those different values doesn't really help you see the data very well. And so I'll show you this with a pivot table. This is % Hispanic in each state. And there are a lot of different possible values for this, and you can see all these values in the pivot table that we create. So I'm going to add the rows are going to be the % Hispanic, and the values are going to be the % Hispanic, but we're going to count the different values. And what you can see over here is that there are a lot of possible values. There's in most states, you know, there's not a lot of gathering around a single value. This is the kind of variable that's often helpful to collapse. So for example, you might want to take the values that are, say, below 20%. That's actually a sociologically significant percentage where you have a minority group and you have a majority. Once you get to 20% or more, you begin to move away from some of the really extreme effects of tokenism. So 20% is a kind of interesting number to break off at. I'm actually going to do that here where I have strategy 1, 20% or higher. What I need to do is I need to evaluate the number, the % Hispanic for each state, and decide whether it's going to have an assigned value of 20% or higher or below 20%. And I could do that manually, but that's a really kind of painful thing to do and very prone to mistakes. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write code. I'm going to tell Google Sheets to figure this out for me. And I'm going to use the if-s statement. So if-s, and then I'm going to look at this value. If that is less than 21%, then I want this cell to say below 20%. Now notice I said if it's less than 21%. These are whole numbers, and this is going to give me all the values that are below 20%. 20% or higher. Actually, I want to say if it is below 20%. There you go. I'm going to do the funny thing here. So, and then if B2 is greater than 19%, then I'm going to say that this value is 20% or greater. So it's tricky how you do this, and you have to look really closely at what you're trying to do. But if B2 is below 20%, then it's going to return a statement of below 20%. And if B2 is greater than 19%, it's going to return a value of 20% or greater. Let's see what happens. There you go. And what we can do then is this formula can be applied to each of these cells in this column. So we're just going to copy the formula and we're going to insert it into these cells, and you have recoded this variable. So now you can format a pivot table, data pivot table, and you can put it in our existing sheet again, and now we're just going to put it over here in K1, K2, so we'll see what it looks like. It gives you these, it doesn't want me to put it there. Okay, I won't put it there. Let's try putting my pivot table in. Data pivot table. I'm going to try putting it in the existing sheet, but I'm going to try putting it in Q. Now let's see what happens. Okay. Create. And I'm going to do my variables, and I'm going to do my values, and I'm going to count my values, and you're going to see our pivot table has 8 states with 20% or greater and 43 states below 20%. And if you look here you will see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 states that are 20% or greater. You have validated that recoding. You can also validate it just by looking and saying, is that below 20%? Is that 20% or greater? So that's a really simple recode into 2 values, super helpful for creating categorical values, which you'll be doing some of. I also want to show you how you create a more complicated variable. I want to show you, what if you wanted to take your values and you wanted to say that a state is 0 to 10%, 11 to 20%, 21 to 30%, 31 to 40%, greater than 40%. You use the same command, and the command is equal if s, and you are evaluating this value and asking Google to look at this value, and you're asking Google to see if it is less than 11%. Ooh, don't want a comma there. Less than 11%. And if it is, you want to enter 0 to 10% as the value in that cell. And then if you're only going to capture the ones that are less than 11%. So now you've got to say B2 less than 21%. And you're going to call that, again, in quotes, because you're putting text in here, you're going to call that 11 to 20%. And if B2 is less than 31%, you're going to call it 21 to 30%. You can see that I am capturing all the values and only putting a value in one place. That's absolutely key. You've got to capture all the values, but only assign one new value to each one. So B2 less than 41%, I am going to assign a value of 31 to 40%. And finally, B2 greater than 40% is going to return a value of more than 40%. And then we close it out with an end parentheses. So we actually have 5 different if statements kind of combined here, and it returns a 0 to 10%. And you can copy that to all of these values. We're going to hope we got it right. Here we have New Mexico is more than 40%, so that looks good. 11 to 20%, 12 falls in there. 29% falls in there. So that variable has also worked. What's interesting about this variable, I'm going to create another pivot table. What's interesting about this variable is that I'm going to put it in the existing sheet, and I'm going to click on this cell, and that's where it's going to put it. What a great trick, create, is that that's my variable, and I want my values, and I want it to be the counts. More than 40% is only one of those values. And you can leave that as is, but this suggests that there might be a different variant of strategy 2, that maybe we want to know the lowest 25%. We want to distinguish the second lowest 25%. We want to distinguish the second highest 25%, and then the highest 25%. And the way you would figure this out is your lowest 25% is going to be 0% to whatever the 25th percentile is. And remember how we figured out what the 25th percentile was. We said it was percentile, and then we took the range, which is B2 to B52, and then we asked for the value at 0.25. That is 0.5 or 5%. So 0 anything from 0 to 5% is your lowest 25%. Now, your second lowest 25% is going to be 6% because we're dealing in whole numbers here. And you're going to take this and you're going to change this to 50 because you want to find out what that 50th percentile is. And that is 9%. So now you're going to have a range of 6 to 9%. And that's going to capture kind of the second 25th percentile or second quartile. And then your next is going to be 10% because it's all whole numbers. But now we have to figure out what the 75th percentile is. And the 75th percentile is 13.5%, or we're going to call that 13%. What's happening here is some values are getting split, and that's okay. You can go one way or the other. So 10 to 13% is the second highest quartile. And then our highest quartile is going to be 14% or greater. So this is going to be a different way to recode the variables, but what is going to happen is you'll get roughly the same number of observations in each value of the recoded variable. Write this for quartiles. So if S, and I'm going to start with the highest quartile, so if V2 is greater than 13%. Again, these are whole numbers, so 14 or more is going to be greater than 13%. Then you're going to enter the value highest quartile. And then if B2 is greater than 9%, it's going to be the second highest quartile. And if B2 is greater than 5%, then it's going to be the second lowest quartile. And if B2 is greater than 0%, greater than 0%, then you're going to have the lowest quartile. And remember that Google Sheets is going to assign values. It's going to assign the first value it can, and then it'll move on. And so if it doesn't satisfy this condition, it'll try this condition, then this condition, then this one. And you get the lowest quartile. That would make sense. And then we're going to do a copy C. I'm going to do this for all of these values. And now you have all of these different quartiles. What I want to show you is now what that pivot table now looks like. So data, I'm going to put a pivot table in, and I'm going to put it right over here. So I'm going to put it in the existing sheet, and I'm going to put it right over here. Turns out you can do that this way. And I'm going to create that, and my rows are going to have quartiles, and my values are going to be the quartiles, and it's going to be the count. And we have relatively equal distributions across our different values of the variable. This can turn out to be helpful.